with the biggest team leaders that I coach, they all have one trait in common, is a huge desire to win.
So right now you're coaching these teams. Are you of the mindset of skill development per agent productivity, or would you say that it makes more sense to recruit more bodies to develop? Because certain coaches will say, develop the skills within each person, and others people will say, bring more people in, and then you could develop everybody at the same time and see who succeeds and who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's both. The reality is agent count is what wins. I mean, go through the Real Trends 500 teams, go through the Real Trends 500 boutique, like independent brokerages. Per agent productivity in like the nation across the board is like 10, right? Like if you remove people's admin staff out, a lot of times people are producing at that level. I think the statistic is if you do 25 transactions, that you're in the top 3% of agents in the country. What are the odds that you have a team comprised of the top 3% agents in the country? I mean, it's certainly probable if you have a smaller team, but a lot of these larger teams that I'm coaching, it's definitely agent count. And there's a lot of teams I'm working with right now that are trying to get to, 1,000 listings a year. How do we operationalize that? Okay. And as a coach, I'm convinced that the answer is agent count and skill development.
So to make sure both,
like it's not PPC leads, it's not an offer, it's agent count.
Bring more people in
and develop them.
Yeah.
And odds are, I don't know what the percentage is, but only a percentage of them are going to be, in that 25 deal a year level, right? I mean, it's a numbers game, no matter what.
And this is, and not poo-pooing on anyone that has great people on their team, but I do believe that the average team member in the country is just the average agent in the marketplace with unaverage opportunities. Unaverage opportunities is leadership. Unaverage opportunity is systems and structure. It's training. It's not necessarily leads.
Yeah. It's proximity. It's coaching. It's training, environment.
Well, yeah. But one thing that you said there that's actually pretty good to go into too is we're talking about the change in the marketplace, what you'd have to do as a group, like a team, what you'd have to do as an individual agent, certain things that you'd have to know and adapt. But as a leader, what certain skills do you now need to develop? Because going from a salesperson to a team leader is one transition in itself, and it's a painful one, right, to learn. But what does a leader need to know now to lead people in a changing market like this?
I'd say how to be a leader. There's this Simon Sinek story where he talks about how people send their executives to like an offsite for a leadership conference, and they're like, oh, here you are, you're a leader. What I found is that most people in, our seats, I know you guys are team leaders too, they're not actively working on developing their leadership skills. They're not going to leadership conferences. They're not reading leadership books. You ask them to define leadership or leadership traits, and a lot of times they can't do that. Leading people is different than selling people. You always hear, leadership is influence, and it is. But, I think a trait of good leaders is actually caring about your people's ability to achieve their goals, not your own.
Yeah.
I think the best leaders, if you're trying to sell 500 homes a year, 300 homes a year, you're just piecing that transaction volume together based on people's goals. And sometimes people's numbers are too big and sometimes they're too small. And leaders should be coaching people to their best no matter what. But if I have someone on my team who's great and their goal is 12 transactions and they're capable of 25, I'm going to lose if I just try to drive them to 25 instead of like get them to 12 and encourage them to try to get to 15 because they're better than that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people in our space, they're not leaders. There are plenty of teams where all they're giving people is a card with a logo. They're giving them an endorsement. Those people on those teams, they're not being led. And then there are true leaders in the industry. I coach Kevin Sturdivant. He is an industry leader. He is a great leader in his marketplace. It's almost like he's creating a movement, right? But people want to be around him because he's just so good at building people up and making them better. Yeah. But he does it very unselfishly, and it's never about him.
Yeah. No, that's Kevin's a good example of it because he's very selfless. I think of Colton too when I think of that too. He's just very vulnerable and shares his story and shares like why his mission, his plan is, and his vision. And he carries good integrity with his actions that align with that vision as well. What are other characteristics of like world-class leaders that you see that would need to be there for someone to actually be able to grow and build?
leaders are market experts. If we want to like take it back to one of the first questions on like, how do you lead the market? You have to know what's going on. Yeah. If you look at like any first class executive, they really understand their industry. They understand the competition. They understand different models. They understand there's different paths to hit their goal. So they have an ability to pivot.
Yeah.
They know how to develop people, or if they don't know how to develop people, they know how to hire people to develop their people. You have to know how to delegate if you're going to be a strong leader and understand your strengths and weaknesses. With the biggest team leaders that I coach, they all have one trait in common, is a huge desire to win. Sometimes it's difficult because they want to go to the next level and they might not even be able to give you the answer on what the next level is.
Yeah.
But their desire to win is so strong that they're able to just drive initiatives and pivot and understand what they're doing right and understanding what they're doing wrong.
Yeah. I think that in itself, when you're preaching a vision and you have so much conviction that you're determined to get to those goals, it's not about the person believing in your vision. It's if they see you believe in it so much that you're like believing your vision so much, now they believe in you because you believe it. So that's another way that you can buy people into that vision too, is by having that kind of
For sure.
winning mindset. What are some resources, tools to go towards to develop those kind of leadership skills? Because you spend so many years developing sales skills, and then you try to implement those sales skills like you said earlier, and now you're trying to sell people to motivate them to move forward. And then you realize how that blows back in your face, like really bad.
Or you're just thinking that people are going to
be the same person,
be the same as you.
Yeah.
They're going to handle situations the same, and you get frustrated because you say like,
yeah.
You start having that mentality of like, well, I could have closed that transaction.
You only wanted to make 100. What's wrong with you? Like, don't you want better life? And then they're like, okay, then maybe this person doesn't like want it's for selfish reasons. So what are some good ways to develop that? So like, let's say someone's there, they're producing a good amount as an independent agent. Now they want to build a team. So now they're ripping at the seams. They need to hire a buyer's agent to take over the overflow. What are some of the things, the tools that they should reference to so that way they can develop those skills?
Well, I think you have to decide what your leadership style is going to be. Like, I really like servant leadership. And I mean, there's just tons and tons and tons of books on it. I mean, John Maxwell, Simon Sinek books, etc. There's no lack of resources. There is lack of resourcefulness, right? People just don't go look for the answers, and then they just fail and fail and fail. I always think about, have you guys ever seen that movie, Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
They're in the bar and then they're talking shit to each other. And he's like, oh, you're going to serve me fries. And he's like, you're going to spend this much money on an education that you could have gotten from the public library. I mean, that's being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I can't tell you how much I've learned from just watching Simon Sinek videos on YouTube. Like, I've learned a lot about leadership from reading his books and watching him on YouTube. When it comes to hiring a buyer's agent, it's just delegation, right? We don't have to just look to the real estate industry for the answers. Across all industries, people are delegating.
Yeah.
Right? Across all industries, people have administrative assistants. Across all industries, people have ISA staffs or, call centers, right? Outbound salespeople. So there's tons of lessons that we could learn from other industries, but let's be honest, they probably do it better than us.
Yeah.
So often as an industry, we're only looking at what we're doing. For most of my career, I've tried to ignore the real estate industry and try to look outside. Like, we're with the same company, which is a virtual company, but I believe productivity lives in an office. And if people want to argue that, just go look at every Fortune 500 company in America. They're making people go back into an office because productivity lives in an office. It only doesn't live in an office when they're trying to cut costs.
Yeah.
But when they're trying to maintain profitability, people are in the office.
Yeah.
The most productive people in this industry, they are in an office in the morning, creating opportunity, and in the afternoon, they're servicing it.
Yeah. And that comes with culture too, within the environment that they're in. I forgot what study or test they did. It was definitely in Europe somewhere. I want to say like Sweden or something like that, where they had like several students learning something, like a new topic or a subject. And they made one seem like it was really fun. Everything else was like mundane. And the group that it was associated with fun excelled like tenfold in comparison. Mm-hmm. So it's like culture, productivity, all within that. You can't create a virtual culture.
Yeah, totally. And I think some people need to realize like they just don't have what it takes to be a leader, right? Like you can go online
100%.
And watch videos. You can read all the books in the world. You can go to events and try to become a better leader. But some people just don't have it in them. And then, but that doesn't mean you can't grow a team. You can grow a team, you just have to hire that leadership, hire the sales manager.
100%.
Like I think of like Tina Call, right? She told us, she's like, I don't want to
be a sales coach. Yeah.
I don't want to be the sales coach, right? I'm going to bring somebody in who can do that. And a lot of times, if you have the budget or if you work your way up to generate that team, I guess maybe you have to be in that role for a bit, but work your way up to remove yourself and hire somebody. You can oftentimes hire somebody who's better at it than you anyway.
Yeah. It's like you said it earlier, David, right? It's like being able to assess the reality of what's going on around you. So it's like macro and micro within the organism of the team, in the marketplace, within the economy, and being able to establish what steps you need to make to move forward quickly, right? Yeah. No, that's a lot of value there. I guess one thing that we can conclude everything with is the virtues of leadership and what you've seen so far. What are some of the pitfalls that someone should avoid?
So here's like common pitfalls. A lot of times, a driver will go, I can't communicate to this person because they're X, right? Or I can't keep an assistant. It's like, no, you're just being a dick. You're not treating people the way that they deserve to be treated, right? Drivers actually, when you research personality types, which is what most team leaders are, they actually have the easiest job of changing their personality style. Like they have the easiest style of blending in and acting like someone else and like mirror and matching. So many team leaders, like a big pitfall like of leaders on team leaders or team leaders is they underpay for a position, right? They hire an administrative assistant at $36,000 a year and they expect $80,000 a year work ethic.
Right.
You just can't get that. You get what you pay for, right? Like so many ISAs fail because we get them overseas or we pay them nothing. That is a skilled labor position.
Yeah.
Right. Not being able to see that. That's a huge pitfall of leadership. But I think that's just the biggest thing I see is a lack of awareness of what's going on in the business and what it takes to get from here to there. It's like, hey, I wrote a business plan. I just never looked at it again. I wrote a business plan. I just never assessed what it would take to get there. I wanted to hire people. I just didn't care if they were good or not. I didn't interview them. I just hired people because they showed up.
Everything you're hitting is so accurate. We had 16 outbound callers, like ISAs at one point. Our expectation was for them to call for 8 hours a day.
Virtual system.
Yeah, virtual.
They were in the Philippines.
Yeah. So our expectation was for them to call for 8 hours a day straight. And when we were venting to one of our mentors, we were like, man, it's just like they're calling for 8 hours a day. This is their production. He was like, when's the last time you called for 8 hours a day? I was like, no, I wouldn't. That's crazy. I wouldn't do that. He's like,
I'd never do it. Yeah.
Do you think you would burn out real quick? I'm like,
you and I have done it, but we haven't done it 5 days in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Not on a daily basis every single day. But he was just like, wouldn't you burn out as well? Right. Like it should be, the incentive should be based off of like the objectives that they're accomplishing, not based off of like the length of time that they're just on there, just mundanely calling and ringing and ringing.
If we go to outside industries, right? An outside salesperson, someone who's making outbound calls at Intel, Nike, a good company, they're making like 150.
Yeah.
They're making like 200 with incentives, right? Just the person setting appointments, right? Even go look at the car industry, right? Even those guys are getting paid more than we're paying people in real estate.
Yeah.
So I think it's, that awareness factor, it's an easy thing to point out to people. And when they start living in that, you start seeing change in an organization, always for the better.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't want to pay for it as a team leader, which a lot of people don't, then don't. Maybe you're just not ready for that role and you need to go drive revenue in other places. But those are common mistakes that I've seen.
Yeah. It's, I'll say this, and I was shadowing Bernie Gallerani's team about a month and a half ago in Nashville. And he has this like massive office space. And it used to be a call collection center where they had 500 outbound callers or just ISAs or individuals making calls nonstop. There was 3 pits in that building, right? You had the entrance pit. You needed a clearance card to get to the next room, which was an interview room, and you needed another clearance to get into the call center room. And the way that it was designed, and the reason it was like that, is that they were interviewing a number of people, maybe 10, 15 people every single day. And they were firing 5 or 6 people every single day and constantly turning over that whole pond.
Yeah.
And it was just madness, right? Where people would just constantly in and out. And you had to, if they would reject your clearance card, now you couldn't come back in the building. So they made it that way. It was a turn and burn, right? But then that's why like no one ever wanted to stay there for a long period of time. So upper management was being destroyed, but that's not a business, right? Essentially, if the model is to just constantly recruit and turn and burn, you're going to essentially saturate it and then end up like burning everybody in that that field eventually. So something that can live and something that can be a brand that's actually people want to be a part of is something that has those features.
One of the ways I've coached people for a long time is what's the fastest, easiest way for them to achieve their goal where they're happy to go to work every day?
Create an environment where you enjoy being in.
Yeah, but sometimes you can just ask them that. Like, hey, what's the fastest, easiest way for you to achieve your goal where you'd be happy going to work every day? And they'll tell you, right? And if they don't know, you could coach them to it. But as a coach, that's like a framework that like lives in my head. Because if I can get someone to go to work every day where they're happy and do something consistently, they're going to win.
Yeah.
Right. And then sometimes I can add in those things they don't like. Like I had this gal that I coach who's really into video, and all she wanted to do was video. And if you actually looked at where her business came from, I don't think she would have to do another video ever again to be successful. Yeah. But I'm like, hey, for every 2 hours of video creation you do, you owe me an hour of calling. What do you guys think happened in the next 6 months in her business?
It blew up.
It blew up, right? Because the outbound, you know, it went from a cold call to a warm call because of the marketing she was doing. But waiting for it to come inbound, a lot of those inbound calls never came.
Yeah.
Right. She's happy going to work making videos. Well, I can add an hour that's maybe a little bit uncomfortable. And guess what? She's money motivated. As soon as the money came, she loved that task.
Yeah.
Now she probably converted into prospecting focused, marketing based instead of marketing focused and no prospecting at all.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool, man.
Great.